Intertextual Cardboard Experience.
Hello and welcome to Intertextual Cardboard Experience. Special guest today in Stephen Aramini, designer of some games that we're going to be talking about. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I'm going to eventually get down to some of the kind of like nuts and bolts with the organization of this podcast. But kind of the first section that I just wanted to check in on with you was just some basic introductory stuff. About you, what got you into games, game designs, and what other hobbies and interests do you have?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with how I got into game design, which was around 2013, I think. Um, and Ironically, I got into game design before I got into board gaming, which sounds very weird, but um, I just wanted to take on a game design project. More as like an art exercise, and my scope of like what board games were was like super limited, like Monopoly and Uno and those types of games. And so I didn't really kind of even know there was this whole world of board gaming. And but so I just went about creating a board game that I partnered up with my friend Dan Thompson, who did the art, and we put together a game called Payload, which was a train themed, essentially Uno game. And that ended up becoming Yardmaster, which was my first published game. And I had put the art together and stuff for it, and I had really no concept of what to do with it. Like I didn't like think ahead of like, okay, now that I've created this game, what am I going to do with it? Um and just through, different means, I ended up finding a board game meetup here in where I live in Reno, and met someone that said you should enter this in a contest. And there was a contest in a not too far away convention called SaltCon. So I entered that in what was called the Ion Award, and it ended up winning and finding a publisher that way. And so I sort of, backed into the hobby. And then once I kind of learned about the hobby, then it just kind of opened the floodgates of, all of the different games that are out there and all the different mechanics. And then I was of course hooked because I had success with my very first game. So I was like, oh man, this is great. So that's kind of how I got into board gaming and game design, sort of fell into it. But as far as like other things beyond board games, I have a wife, I have two cats, I have a dog, and we live here in Reno, which is in Sierra Nevada um, mountains. So there's a lot of cool outdoor activities. So I like doing a lot of outdoor activities, camping, traveling, those kinds of things when the weather permits.
Do
Yeah.
no no nice weather right now for you?
It's pretty dry right now, but it's really cold. But yeah, last year was like unprecedented amounts of snow in our area. We,
Oh,
in the mountains, we had like, oh my gosh, it was like 700 inches of snow or something. So
whoa.
we were snowed in for a good 4 months. And I'm not like a winter person. Like I grew up skiing and stuff, but I don't. Now I just want it to be summer.
Yeah. That's fair. That's a crazy amount of snow.
Yes.
That's awesome. All right. Yeah, that's honestly very interesting as to, kind of how you got into the hobby. And now, I mean, you're sitting at like that decade-ish mark, like 10 years or so, and of like, designing and then, entering and doing all sorts of other things too. So that's like a good mark. And it is also interesting to me, just like what you're talking about with, a lot of like initial perceptions as to like what, board games are, and then what your perceptions are, and then seeing these other things, but then kind of like probably really rapidly changing your idea as you were like making your own games and seeing all these other things that existed too. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a never ending kind of experience in education, because I feel like every time I play a new board game, it brings something new into my brain. Whether it's just, enjoying that or giving me ideas for future game designs. But yeah.
awesome. Okay, cool. So, yeah, like I said, just some introductory stuff to start. And now you're going to get my apologies, a little bit of some of the nuts and bolts of the format that I have for you. So, first things first, like I kind of have like three main sections of types of or clumped questions. I think they'll all make sense. One thing that I'm going to it's a new year that we're having this interview, and I've been trying to incorporate some feedback with the podcast, and I've had a lot of really awesome conversations, but I have kind of noticed and a couple people who are definitely less familiar with particular designers or games have kind of said, well, I don't necessarily know what the game is about, and this is more conversational, more interview based, so it's not necessarily about mechanisms 100%. So I'll like before we talk about a game in depth, I'll do like a very poor explanation. You can kind of sign off on it or be like, "Oh, that's terrible. Let me let me fix that." And then yeah. So first things first. What like some of the games that I want to talk about are a few of your Buttonshy games and the ones that I'm more familiar with, and then maybe some ones that I'm less familiar with. And I mean I know them all, but I've played a ton of the Opolis games, and that's where my experience comes in. But Sprawlopolis was the first one in that series, and Buttonshy, for anybody who is not super familiar, 18 cards is the design, and for Sprawlopolis and moving forward, 18 double-sided cards. One side it's divided into 4 sections, and you're trying to like match up similar locations or areas while trying to meet the scoring requirements that are on the back of 3 of the cards that you don't play. So that's my very poor explanation of like Sprawlopolis moving forward. Does that work?
That's brilliant.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's good. So working through that too, I kind of have like this another sprawling meta thought for the episode, but I'm going to kind of give myself 3 scoring cards for this episode too. So this is self-reflective on me, but each chunk maybe I'll score myself. And let's put it this way: I've played. I didn't actually look at the number right before this, but I've probably played between Sprawlopolis, Agropolis, and now Naturopolis, I don't know, 60 or so games. And it's not like the biggest achievement because they're pretty quick, but that's still a lot of gaming.
Yeah.
Between the 3, I love them. I lose at them quite frequently. And I guess that means I love losing. So let's see if I can lose my interview challenge. And I'm going to be like rating myself on things that I know I definitely do with vocal fillers. I sometimes have questions that they wind up differing greatly in their meaning than the way I deliver them. So that's condition 2. And then condition 3 is I say nice, neat, cool, I like that, or that makes a lot of sense. Those I just say them all the time. And I guess like the positive here is I have this in the back of my head, but just like in Sprawlopolis or Agropolis, like I know what the scoring conditions are, and sometimes I just go for it and just make the best looking thing and lose no matter what. But that is what it is.
Quick interrupting future me. These Opolis inspired interview scoring cards of sorts actually weren't really brought up later due to timing, but I did draft up some cards. So check out the show notes. They'll be linked. They're kind of funny, definitely complete nonsense. And despite the fact that I typically will lose at Sprawlopolis, Agropolis, Metropolis, this episode is definitely a winner. So keep listening to it. Enough with interrupting me, and back to the show.
Okay, so we're on to like you. That's a huge, I don't even know, tangent, but we're off of that. So, thinking about your designs for, your Buttonshy games, obviously they are an exercise in minimalism, like really trying to pare it down to as little as possible. I have to imagine that that is like quite difficult. So I'm kind of curious about your thought process and the way that the designs work, and trying to pare it down to those 18 cards in addition to working with co-designers on those types of games.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Buttonshy and those 18 card games go, that actually started with Circle the Wagons prior to Sprawlopolis. And Circle the Wagons used the same system basically of 18 cards, four broken into four. The backside's got the rules. It was a two-player competitive game. So so that actually informed Sprawlopolis, just the success of that formula, and we sort of ported that over to a sort of solo or co-op experience. But for Circle the Wagons, it was just in response to a contest that Buttonshy had. And when you're a beginning designer, you're trying to scratch and claw and get your foot in the door in the industry any way you can. So early on, I was entering a lot of contests, just to try and get something picked up. And so that's really what the catalyst was for creating Circle of Wagons and the 18 card format. I didn't choose the 18 card format. It sort of chose me by saying, hey, we want to enter this contest as a way to maybe get our foot in the door. So that's kind of how we arrived at that 18 card, was just that was the restriction of it. And then from there, yeah, I think definitely that minimalist approach is it's definitely challenging, because there is that danger of trying to shove too much into a small package and having it feel forced or compromised. So, we tried to avoid that, with just having like one sort of simple system that just seemed to create the variability that I think is pretty hard to achieve with 18 cards. So we kind of hit upon a system that seemed to work. And then I kind of brought it initially to my friends Danny and Paul, who also live in Reno. Or Paul doesn't anymore, but at the time he did. So I just, we would play test other people's stuff, and then we just kind of said, let's do this as co-design, because we would meet at lunch every day and play it and just kind of try to fine tune it and work on how it worked. And I think working with the co-designers is great. I have done it on a lot of my games, honestly, because it's just so much to me easier to sort of design not in a vacuum or in secrecy, and just kind of bounce ideas off and get other perspectives. So like I feel like the co-design thing is something that I think and ultimately creates a better game. But yeah, basically yeah, I don't know what more to say about that. I don't know how far in the weeds I should go, but that was kind of the initial approach to just that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, there are a couple funny things, not funny things in there that I quite liked. So you mentioned, Danny Devine and Paul Kluka, and that's one of the things I was going to ask, because you said kind of like we, and that was I guess for getting into these earlier Buttonshy competitions or contests that was like the intent from the get-go, is just working with those two and putting something together?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, we would just meet up at lunches and play games. And so we were just meeting up so often playing games. And then it was just like, hey, I got this game. You want to kick around these ideas? And, the original Circle of Wagons was not a circle. It was a straight line, and you were kind of doing the wagon train from one end to the other, and it was this big long line of cards. And then uh I don't even remember who came up with, but we changed it to the circle just because it made for a more interesting draft. And yeah, so just like little iterations like that. But those were just things that every time we'd get together, we just kind of fine tune the game, and that had to come together pretty quickly also because I think we had like a month um to pull it together in time for the contest. So
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's neat. Well, first off, having it start in a line, obviously if that was the case, you're starting at card one. Presumably that's the way you had it no matter
yep,
what. And now you have the option of having the opponent pick where you're starting instead. Just adds that variability, that extra kind of little bit of strategy, and then also plays into the title too.
exactly. Yep.
Great. And oh yeah, and you mentioned that Circle the Wagons kind of then prompted the work into Sprawlopolis and then subsequent kind of like iterations and redesigns of that too. And that's funny because well, talking about kind of like ordering, I played, those and then was kind of like, hey, like you should check out Circle the Wagons. So the way I would explain Circle the Wagons would be, competitive Sprawlopolis, even though that's the one that came first. So
Yeah, and most people honestly discover Sprawlopolis first, so or they don't even know about Circle the Wagons. But yeah, I mean, Sprawlopolis definitely is the one that has the most familiarity for sure.
yeah, and like I said, I've gotten like, a ton of seeing it out there and people talking about Circle the Wagons too, and I'm glad that I have all of them. And a good kind of segue, I have, as far as I know, probably all of the expansion and combination stuff for all the Opolis games. So kind of speaking on that a little bit, this is 100% honesty. I have all of them. I mentioned that I played all the individual games a bunch. I have not combined them in any way. I want to. I don't know why I haven't. I don't know if I'm intimidated. I don't know if I feel like I'm going to lose by even more than I typically do. Like I really couldn't speak on that a ton. But I guess do you have like any notes or thoughts on, you know, like any like expansions or the way that they have been combined with the Combopolis stuff or anything like that that you just have any fun insights on or any thoughts about?
Um, I think in general the expansions probably are only for like the more, I don't know, the inner circle of players. I would say majority of people just play with the base games. But we wanted to, when we came out with Agropolis, we wanted to create the Combopolis that, because it was one of those things where they were getting requests, Buttonshy has like this huge Discord community. They were getting a lot of requests of like, are we going to be able to combine these games? And so that was the big design challenge with combining them, was how to do it, because I think the initial instinct is just, mash them together and build a really big community, and that just doesn't work. It creates a mess, honestly, especially with the way the scoring is. So we had to create a way to like sort of keep the same footprint but combine them. So that one does tweak the rules a little bit, where you're deciding which, you have to decide, do I play a card from Sprawl or do I play a card from Agropolis? You don't get to choose both each turn. And then you have some scoring criteria that sort of overlap and sort of reward for mixing and matching. So it was a little bit different system, but yeah, we thought it turned out pretty well. And then of course, naturally, when we came out with Naturopolis, we needed to do, well, now you can combine the Agropolis, Naturopolis, and Naturopolis and Sprawl. And then, then we're like, well, someone's going to want to mash them all together. So that was Ultimopolis, which, is kind of bonkers. But yeah, those were fun to put together. In all honesty, I feel like we have exhausted that whole approach. Danny and I are certainly sick of creating more scoring conditions. I think we're up to like 100 now between all the other expansions. But as far as all the other little expansions, those were just kind of fun, little add-ons, just to kind of shake things up. And some might hit somebody and others might not, like beaches, which actually Jason had put together. We just sort of supported him on that, but beaches is probably the most popular one. And I think that one does a really great job of kind of mixing it up with just some simple 4 cards to kind of give it a new thing. But yeah, I mean, the little expansion stuff is just kind of a staple of Buttonshy stuff. And when we designed the core games, the core 18, we aren't really even thinking about that stuff. All that stuff just kind of comes out of it, of like, okay, what are ways we can just shake it up and create some more variability? Because there are people that do play it, like I know you've played it quite a bit, but I mean, there are some people that have played it thousands of times, which is insane. But
yeah. It's a perfect type of game to get, like I said, so many different plays in, and especially like if you want to approach it in different ways with the different expansions or combining them, or really trying to like actually win, or which I mean I guess would be the goal of the game, or just playing around and like messing around. Like I don't know, like sometimes I'll be super critical or super analytical, be like, okay, I've got these scoring conditions, this is the way I'm going to maximize them all. Sometimes I'm very just kind of like intuition, like I think if I do this and this, that it's all going to work out super well for me. And sometimes the ones where I just go on that intuition, like I'll win, I'm like, hey, that was great. Sometimes the ones where I overanalyze, I do terribly. So I don't know what the best approach is for my brain, but I don't really care. I'll keep playing it. And now with us talking and my admittance of never combining them, I'll give myself that assignment. Like the next like week and a half. I mean, I can't imagine that I won't be able to figure it out. Whether or not I'll win or do well, that's a different story, but I definitely will. So I got one more kind of like collaboration question, and this is like a thought. And I mentioned kind of like at the onset of the like collaboration and really trying to pack everything into that minimalist like necessity of the Buttonshy games and the competitions and everything like that. I know that this isn't the way that it's done, but I just think, especially with that set format of the cards and having a few different designers, I kind of have like a funny vision, or just like a little comic in my head, like I'll take 6 cards, you take 6 cards. I'm assuming that's not the case, but like how would you then kind of, especially I'd have to assume it's hinging on all of those different scoring cards. Like you said, you're up to like 100 or so of them now. Like how do you like work through that, play test it, and really figure out which ones you're going with, or which iterations you're making from, Sprawlopolis to Agropolis, or I guess anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, with a co-design in its beginning stage, it usually starts with one designer going to the other designer with an idea or some rough theme mechanics type stuff. And then, sometimes that shakes out where it is just like it's a single designer and they just get some input, from the play tests. And other times it's like, it's sort of like, hey, I have some beginnings of ideas. Let's collaborate on it. And you're going to need more of that back and forth. And so it's worked that way sometimes where, you know, it's sort of like Danny's got his DNA on that game. So it's Danny's game, and I might be just a play tester that's contributing to it. But then in other instances, we feel like we're just kind of sharing enough of the ideas that a co-design seems to work. But so it usually starts with one person's kind of core idea, and then the other kind of helps bring it to life, and kind of almost works like in a developer role early on to kind of get it shaped up, and then from there's a lot of back and forth. In terms of like Sprawl and like the sequels and stuff, we just put together a spreadsheet, like a Google, doc or spreadsheet, and just start jotting down ideas. And a lot of times it'll start with a name. We're very stupid and punny with our names in all of the Sprawl games. And sometimes those names will like actually inform the rule. Like we're coming out with a sequel to Circle the Wagons this year, which is just another 18 goals, and a way to basically combine both of them into a 2-round game. But it's, if you're a fan of the original Circle of Wagons, it's just like more of the goals and more of the same of what you like and a little twist on it. But in that case, like Danny and I went to BGG Con together in November, and we made that whole game on the plane. So we sat next to each other, and between the plane trip there and the plane trip back, we designed all 18 cards. So now it's just a matter of just been testing them and stuff and tweaking them. But like that was like a true collaboration where we were just kicking around ideas the whole time on the plane. And that all pretty much came together on a flight.
Oh, that's super interesting. Having the ability to kind of mess around with different approaches to that collaboration, like you said, developer, designer, completely together, just like bouncing off ideas and working in that way. I mean, getting to interview all sorts of different people and hearing some of these stories about, I designed this game or 2 games in a week, or we designed it on a plane. That's super unique and interesting, and just kind of like, to me and my goal, and hopefully people listening just can kind of add to their experience and their understanding of the games as well. Okay, so kind of like wrap up question. So I have like capping off each section, and I think the next section is going to be quite a bit shorter before we get to kind of like the final one, is this idea of kind of like hidden gems. So obviously, your games within the Buttonshy catalog, those ones we've mentioned, are super popular. A lot of people love them and recommend them, and then they keep getting expanded upon and reiterated. But do you have any games in the Buttonshy catalog, not necessarily even yours, but just ones that you feel are kind of like a hidden gem that you want more people to know about?
Yeah, I would say Making Manhattan is a favorite. John Wood designed that, but I got to play test that and be involved in the early stages of that. And that one I think just kind of hits the kind of puzzly nature of what I like about Buttonshy games. And so that one I think is kind of a hidden gem, because I don't think a lot of people know about it. It didn't get a Kickstarter. It was just released, on their website, and obviously went out to the board game of the month people, but it didn't get like a wider release. So I think a lot of people just don't know about it, but it's just, it's just a fun little city building puzzle. So maybe I like it because it's Sprawl is a city builder, but it's very different, it's very different. So I think that one's one that immediately comes to mind.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I mean, you said it. I had BGG open already, so I typed it in, and now, well, it's saved in my recently viewed, and I'll definitely look at it more. Yeah, it looks really cool. I like the style, and it definitely looks quite different than like Sprawlopolis or something like that too. So
Yeah, that probably my other favorite one that is, it's not totally unknown, but it's one of the lesser known ones. It's called Wonder Tales. And that one's it's really charming art, charming theme, and it's just really fun to like it's like a spatial kind of adjacency puzzle. Again, kind of tickles the part of my brain that I really like, because Sprawl does a lot of those same things, this adjacent to that, and it has a lot of that. And so that's another really fun one. That's kind of a hidden gem, I'd say.
neat. Yeah, sorry, I'm straining, and listeners won't understand. I I have a bunch of bunch games, like a box of, I don't even know at this point, like 30, 40 of them, but the two you mentioned are ones that I don't own, so I'm
Yeah,
looking
hidden
forward to.
gems.
That's the point. I get all the insider information this way. So cool. Okay. Very neat. We'll be moving on to kind of like middle section. I think this is going to be relatively quick, but uh, we'll peel back the curtain, and unfortunately, like, well, not really nuts and bolts stuff here, but I think I wouldn't even call it research process, but prep process for getting these interviews set up is, well, it's nice, it's easy. I get to play games that I've already played, or B, I get to play games that I wanted to play, and then I can poke around on the internet, check out social media, YouTube, interviews, websites of particular designers, anything along those lines. And so I was kind of looking at, well, X or Twitter from you, kind of like in the spring of 2023, and it looked like you were kind of pulling up a lot of older designs or things that you had been kicking around and were wanting to like revisit. And then obviously, we're going to be getting to Fliptown as kind of like the final chunk, or it's tied to that final chunk of questions that I have for you. But like, so you obviously don't just do the Buttonshy games. You've got like quite a variety of different types of designs, and so I guess like to me, and this is something that I've been learning a little bit more about through the interview process too, is the fact that you might like design a game, and then like the final published product will come out a couple years later or something like that. I mean, timelines vary obviously depending on the mode in which they're delivered, but I guess for you, like your thoughts on like kind of like your designs across like all the different variety that you have, and revisiting older ideas and everything like that. Like, what sort of things are you thinking about in like design space now, 10 plus years later into uh, the hobby, and what you're trying to accomplish, and all the different like variety, I guess. I'm not sure if that's question enough.
Yeah, I can ramble. I can pick it up and run with it from there. Yeah, I mean, for me, I am never working on one project. So I always have design projects in various stages. Some are like paper sketches or loose ideas in my brain. Others are like very early conceptual. Some are in, early testing. Some are in like pretty polished testing, but haven't gotten it to a publisher. Some are with a publisher, signed, and some are in the publication queue. So I have ones in like all these different stages. And I think for me, that method just works really well because at the end of the day, this is still a hobby. I have a day job. So I work on this stuff at night and on weekends and stuff. And I have always kind of said to myself, like, don't want it to feel like, you know, work or a chore to work on things. There are elements that can be chores, especially when it comes to the publishing side of things, which I now am dabbling in. But I think just like being able to bounce from like, I don't feel like working on that game right now. I feel like working on this game right now. It just kind of keeps me kind of motivated and kind of excited to work on that project. And if I'm not excited to work on it, I generally don't work on it. Now sometimes I have to if I'm like under a deadline with a publisher or something, or I have to get something done by a deadline, then you have to just kind of power through and get certain things done. But a lot of the creative aspects, I just kind of work on them when I want to. And sometimes they work out and turn into published games, and sometimes they don't. Like you mentioned on Twitter, you know, I was like, hey, I was resurrecting these old ideas. And sometimes those actually, I take parts of those and plug them into a new game 6 months or a year or years down the road, where I'm like, it never really leaves my brain as an idea I liked. In fact, one of those games, I think it was like a little castle building 3D block building game. I'm still working on that, like actually with my friend Janice, who we're working on it right now. Like she sent me stuff like 2 days ago to look at. Um, so yeah, I'm always like, there are no dead ideas. They all just gonna get put on the back burner or thrown in the pile of something from there I liked for some reason, even though I couldn't make it work out. So I might resurrect it and bring part of that back or repurpose it down the road.
I like that process a lot. I I feel like, well, I say this, I don't make games. I have some docs where I throw some stuff around, but I don't know. Maybe I'm afraid. I'm afraid of a lot of things, but but nonetheless, I think, you know, I've talked about it a little bit before, but kind of my process with these interviews has changed a bit too. And it was something that I had a couple years ago and kicked around and tweaked and redid a little. So I'm all for having as many things exist in as many places and resurrecting them and grabbing. I think that's, I don't know,
Yeah, and
I feel that.
it's a process, right? That just like being an interviewer or doing a podcast, you know, yeah, you experiment, you go, this worked pretty well, this didn't work as well, let's try this next time. And it's the same thing with game design. It's like anybody who starts game design is probably going to be not a very good game designer, because you just don't know it. It's just, it's hard to understand. And the more you do game design, hopefully the more you can kind of improve on that craft. And you know, I'm still, you know, trying to learn every day and get better. And sometimes you put a product out there and it hits, and sometimes you put something out there and you're like, yeah, you know, maybe that wasn't the best game or my best effort, or there were flaws with it, and you live and, you know, live to fight another day and learn from it, get better.
Cool. Well, that's kind of another little good segue then. So, I mean, you mentioned how, you know, different games might kind of like hit or catch at different times, and you know, maybe some of that is linked to like what you said. There may have been like little flaws or what have you, or maybe it's just like a timing thing. I mean, honestly, when it comes to like success of anything, you know, I think timing is always a very interesting element too. So I'm going to revisit that kind of question from the Buttonshy topic and apply it to you. So obviously you have like a slew of popular games that people love and play a ton. Do you feel like there are any that maybe fall into that category of not quite hitting the way you thought they would be, and are a hidden gem to you out of your designs?
Well, most of my games, you know, are from small independent publishers. So I think a lot of them probably are fairly unknown in the greater gaming world. I would say Sprawlopolis is probably the one game that when you mention it to gamers, they might be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that." Most of the other games that I have put out are probably hidden, whether they're gems or not. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would point to um, a really hidden one that very few people know called Coin and Crown, which was one of the first games I ever made, and I made it for the Game Crafter. They had a contest on the Game Crafter, and I made it there, and that was just kind of like something that I put together with my friend Janice, and we just you know we had a good time putting it together, and she did all the art for it, and it's very kind of a novice approach because we were really in the beginning stages and stuff. And but I I think that it has a very stark minimalist look, um, and obviously a very small publisher, and very early in my design quote career. So that one was one that is very hidden, but I've always kind of liked it. Yeah, I've always really liked the mechanics and the idea of it. I don't know that's like the perfect game, but I really liked and for those that don't know, the basic premise is it's a bag builder. But what you're building in your bag is your economy. So it's a coin bag builder. So you start with, some bronze and silver coins, and then over the course of the game, you can upgrade and get more silver, more gold, and as you pull coins out of the bag, you basically are able to buy bigger and better things to improve your kingdom and stuff. So that core premise, I really like that, and I thought that was a pretty fun one that I still haven't really seen in the market. So who knows? Maybe I'll revisit that one someday and try to put out a bigger, better version of it.
Yeah, like you said, you mentioned how you like kind of some of the like minimalistic style and everything like that, and I'm clicking around and looking at it. Combine that with like an interesting bag building mechanic, and well, you have me very intrigued. So thank you for pointing to that game. Cool. We'll kind of like move to the final main section now, and well, you just mentioned that when people are talking about like you and your designs, they'll know Sprawlopolis, but I think one of the games that's probably going to keep popping up more and more, and I think I mentioned before, is Fliptown, which is your most recent published game. Oh man, when the games come in and when I play them kind of vary, but this one I think I got from shipping box to unwrapping to reading and playing relatively quickly, and I know it came before December, but I think I really dove into it late November, early December with a lot of quick subsequent plays of it. And here's my very poor explanation. Fix if you need to, but it is a game in the now like flip and write genre where you have a standard deck of cards. You're revealing 3 of them, and you have what's it, five turns each round? Is that the right number?
Yep.
Okay, 5 turns each round, and oh yeah, that makes sense. You're building a poker hand. So I guess that the mechanisms make sense with the numbers too. And then you're using the suit of one card and the number of other, and the suit goes to one of the 4 kind of like main areas of the board, and the number kind of differentiates what you can do with it within each space. And it's been being received super well. A lot of people quite like it. I am one of those people. It's been kind of described as a sandboxy flip and write, which I don't think many necessarily are. And yeah, that's kind of going to springboard us into the Western bit. But any thoughts or things that I got wrong there?
No, I mean the big differentiator in that one is that was published by me. All the other games that I have out there in the wild are all other publishers where I just signed the game with them and then they published it. And this was one where I wanted to try and take on making a game myself, being not only the designer but the publisher.
Oh, cool. Well, congrats on that first publication, and not just having a very successful design, but a very successful first publication too, and one that, like I said, I think I've seen popping up more and more, people playing it and liking it, and I'll be one of those people to keep doing that and promoting it in as small or big a spaces as I can too. So cool. So the final section then is kind of based on, Fliptown and Western. So, your very first design game was, oh no, the first Buttonshy game was Circle the Wagons, having that kind of like Western feel, and then now Fliptown Western feel. And my kind of conceptualization of like a Western, I don't have like the strongest knowledge, but I mean, I guess to me, I can kind of throw all these things together. So first off, like the idea of like the Western, is that something that is kind of frequently like on your mind? Do you incorporate place, like being in Reno, into your design? Are there any kind of like movies, books, games, or anything else that really make you think like Western game, and trying to, create this unique Western sandboxy flipping right?
Um, so I I won't say I'm like this huge Western aficionado or fan of the genre from like a movie or book or other sort of entertainment standpoint. I couldn't even tell you why we picked or why I picked Circle the Wagons Western theme for that one. I don't even recall why, but as far as like Fliptown goes, really that one, the mechanics informed the theme, honestly, where I just had seen a ton of roll and writes, where you're rolling the dice, and I hadn't seen really at the time I created it. Now there's a couple other ones that are out there, but I hadn't really seen like a standard poker deck that was the randomizer. Um, and so I was like, I think I could make a pretty cool one, and just poker, just the poker cards, I do live in Reno where there's gambling everywhere. So, my brain went to gambling, and when my brain went to gambling, it went to, Old West. And so that's kind of why I kind of themed that in the Old West. And then from there, things just kind of fell into place in terms of, I think the beauty of the Western genre, the Wild West genre, I should say, is just that there is that sandbox feel. I had played like Western Legends, and it does definitely have that sandbox feel of, there are questions of morality. Do you want to be a good guy or a bad guy? Do you want to do nefarious things, or do you want to be a deputy or a sheriff and do good things? And just that wide open kind of sort of no rules or make your own rules, I guess I could say, of that whole period of our history, and that whole genre just kind of lent itself really well to the type of roll and write, flip and write that I wanted to make, which was, like you said, very sandboxy. I wanted people to be able to go, I want to try this strategy over here. I want to rob a bunch of things this time, but knowing there's consequences. So in the game, there are wanted posters that you acquire. So if you're going to be doing bad things, you have to account for those consequences in the game. But if you don't want to, you can do other things that are more forthright and will maybe win the game for you. So so the theme was really dictated by the poker deck, but then the theme really lent itself really well to the style of game the open kind of style of game I wanted to play or make.
That's that's awesome. And yeah, I think, I've had, I don't even know what I'm up to for that. Probably pushing 10 games already, but early on, the one that kind of like stuck out to me and really had me thinking about just like the little stories that the game was creating was I didn't do any Badlands like stuff early. I just kind of was like, you know what, I'll do the more wholesome work and just kind of gain my points. But then I was at the town and I think like I'm not sure if I couldn't change the value of my number, or I just had it where I was at the store that you could buy the gun. I'm like, sure. And then I think it came up like again within like a turn or two. It's like, all right, we're going all in. And then I just started going for all the biggest targets too, like Robin, looting as I could. And that was the game. That's what changed. So, so I thought that was funny. So I guess you said that you're not much of a Western aficionado, but I guess then the reverse question, has making this game like inspired you to watch anymore, or has there been like any dabbling in like movies or any other things based on?
I mean, no, not really, but if you look closely, at Fliptown, you'll probably see a few nods to like some things that are out there, like, one of the characters is the man in black, so, kind of pulling from Westworld a little bit there, or, when I was growing up, I was a big fan of Tombstone, so I was like, well, I have to have Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, and in the campaign, you can get a deputy badge, or you can be a bad cowboy and get the red sash. So there's some like little nods to some of the some of those types of movies and stuff, um but no, I will confess I've never read a Western novel in my life. And yeah, movies, there's a ton of great old Westerns and stuff, but I just, yeah, I I don't have a ton of knowledge of them, to be honest. I think I think that more so just the idea of there's just some certain genres that I think are appealing to a lot of game designers because they have that sort of, you're not sort of you don't have these guardrails of having to conform to. And I think Western's one of them. I've never made a pirate game, but I think that's another really popular genre because it's like, oh, pirates can do whatever they want. They don't have to conform to the rules. Same with like outer space. It's like kind of like, oh, well, there's no laws in outer space. So I think not that it all has to kind of point to like being bad and stuff, but that's definitely a recurring thing when you get into these sort of like, sort of themes that kind of go away from our modern reality of, living by the rules and living by the everyday that we know. So there's that sort of appeal of like, you can kind of shape the world you want. And I think there's a lot of appeal in that.
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the start of like this little section that I'm definitely less familiar, and you mentioned that you haven't read, like a Western novel. I honestly didn't even really think about, you know, Western novels or books before even, constructing some of these questions and thinking about them. Like, I don't read a ton of genre, quote unquote, fiction in general. Definitely started to read more like sci-fi the past couple of years. And I'm like, oh yeah, like it makes sense if there are Western novels. So I just kind of started looking at some of the more famous ones. But yeah, my cinema knowledge when it comes to Westerns isn't super big. And I mean, I think my biggest experience outside of a couple board games now would be like very minimal amount of Red Dead Redemption as a video game.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And uh really good segue to kind of like my wrap up questions. So thinking about, this is like a standard, well, standard for me now. a question is like having you reflect on like any text, whether that's, you know, a book, show, movie, game, board game, video game, song, album, like whatever that has kind of been stuck on your mind lately. Has there been something that you've like watched or played or listened to that's really not left your brain?
Um, well, yeah, it's hard to break my brain from board games, because I live that so much. But yeah, I guess I'd probably trying to think of a good answer here.
All answers are good as long as it's stuck in the mind.
I don't know. My brain goes to a show, just a show we're just watching right now. It's on Netflix. It's called Connected. And it's kind of a documentary, but it's interesting because it's about the connections in life that sort of tie seemingly random or unconnected things together in our world. And so it's just been a kind of interesting show that we've been watching lately. And there's one show about dust, for example, and it's like the dust um that starts in the Sahara Desert and then lifts up, and how it affects the entire world, from the oceans to space to the Amazon, and kind of everything in between. So that show has just kind of been stuck in my brain because I think it's just an interesting take about how everything we do has a consequence and a connection to everything else we do, for good and for bad. And so, yeah, I don't know that that has anything to do with board games, but maybe there's a way you can find it. But I know that's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be the answer. But yeah, that was just the one thing that kind of recently, I think, because it's just recent in my brain.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, we kind of dabbled in like westerns and stuff for a second, and kind of collaboration and like some of the stories that you had for your designs. But the point of this podcast is to open it up to other things, and it is funny too. Like I've definitely had a number of instances where, you know, talking to people, you know, what not everybody has talked to has been a designer, but like talking to designers, and sometimes the show or the book that they has been on their mind is something they're like thinking about how they would design that if like they were going to take some element or the story and translate it into a game. Sometimes
Oh
not.
yeah, I
There's
mean,
some.
it's like I always I look at the world through the lens of board games because I'm so entrenched in it. So like there's anything out there, I'm like, that would be kind of a cool board game. So I'm always thinking in those terms.
Well, maybe someday you'll make a big global connection scope game.
Yes,
Awesome.
the the butterfly flapping his wings on one side of the world affects this other part of the world.
Well, if you make that game, I'll look into it, all right?
Sounds good.
Okay. So, I guess just kind of final stuff. We talked about like your most recent game in Fliptown. Anything that you want people to kind of look out from for you coming up soon, kind of soon?
Um, yeah, from Buttonshy, we're gonna do another Sprawl sequel. This one's called right now, it's called Casinopolis. We with each one we try to make the name worse and harder to pronounce. So success. But that one's gonna have like actually a gambling Sprawlopolis with a casino gambling twist. So it's kind of an interesting one. I mentioned Circle of Wagons 2. We're working on that right now. So those two are coming, and then Ancient Realm working on several different expansions for that. And so that's going to be coming soon also from Buttonshy. I have some small games. We're actually doing a reprint of Yardmaster with some more content and stuff. And another game through Talon Strikes Games. That's another one. And then 25th Century's got a game that Danny and I co-designed that there is in the art stage, which currently called Paradise Resort. We'll see if that name sticks, but really excited about that one because it's gonna probably be the biggest game to date that we've done, and it's been a long time coming. It's gone through so many iterations, but I think with what we put together, we're pretty excited about that. So, so yeah, that's a couple of other things that are on the horizon, and then working on another game through Right Stuff Games to follow up Fliptown, as well as a solo campaign for Fliptown. So,
Ooh.
lot of irons in the fire.
I'm a big fan of that. Yeah, there's a lot of different things to look out for. So I'll make sure to kind of link, well, your like social media and at the very least like your kind of like designer page on Board Game Geek, but and whatever else I can to like point people to all these new things that will be coming out. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, I saw Casinopolis or Casinopolis when I was clicking through your games too, and you're not going to be combining Casino to the other ones.
No, that one's gonna be a standalone. Standalone. You can't combine it
Okay.
because
Well,
it has some different mechanics going on.
well, for seemingly for your sake, it sounds like that's going to be a welcome little change, and it sounds like the twist of the betting elements are going to be really fun too.
Yeah, hopefully so. Hopefully so.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I had a blast, and like I said, a ton of things to look out from you coming soon.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.
Intertextual Cardboard Experience, the most eclectic podcast about board games and any other text that they connect to. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time here. Any further support, such as sharing the show with friends, following the page's socials in the episode description, writing a review, filling out the feedback form, or doing anything else you can think of is greatly appreciated. Keep playing, watching, reading, listening, experiencing.